Hey everybody, welcome back to the Chronicles of the Range Monkey. I'm your host Natalie, and I'm here with my personal performance coach Chris Bean. And today we're going to be talking about keeping yourself accountable.
Today's video is brought to us by Mantis. The Mantis family of products is integral to ASP staff building handgun and carbine skills and are your most economical and fastest path to improvement in your skills too. Whether you choose the X10, the Laser Academy, the Blackbeard, or use them all in concert, they will help your practice be more effective, efficient, and fun. Go check them out, pick up a unit, and thank them for sponsoring today's video.
Today, I have a few questions that I am bringing to my coach, Chris Bean. And one of them is about keeping yourself accountable. I have been being my own dry fire coach for a little bit. And like I've said on a few of these videos, it's a little bit of a learning curve. I've always had my dad with me on the range, telling me, keeping me on track, helping me uh, not fix my mistakes, but help correct me for future repetitions. And he's a great coach, and so it's a little bit weird going to you know being alone in my dry fire dojo. And another part that's been kind of hard about it is keeping myself accountable. I have a lot in my day to day life. I do also have a full time job that has nothing to do with active self protection. And so it's really easy to get distracted. It's really easy to push dry fire practice off. And I think that's what a lot of us people do. I feel like in our every day to day life, nobody really has time for dry fire practice. And it's cheaper. It helps you be able to practice even when you don't have access to a range with the Mantis Academy. That makes it just a dream. So I really want to be better at holding myself accountable. And me and Chris have been working on this for the past couple of weeks together. And I've realized that I've had to text him and be like, he doesn't ask me to text him or anything, but I like to keep myself accountable. And sometimes I have to text him and tell him, like, oh, hey, this, XYZ popped up and now I can't do my dry fire practice today. And so I want to talk a little bit more about the scheduling because I think that's what the pitfall is for a lot of people's training. So, Chris, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think, and that's why we spent a bunch of time in the goal setting process. And that's why I asked the specific questions. Why is it important to you?
Right.
Not why is it important to me, but why is it important to you? Because, obviously life happens. It does for everybody. There's a myriad of opposing forces that kind of keep us from our goals. But I think once you really try and verbalize and analyze why it is you're doing something, it becomes significantly easier to adhere to. So to give you an idea of my life, I too have a day job, work 60, 70 hours a week. I have multiple jobs in the firearm space. So I really don't have much time for me. So much so that like friends that like want to go shoot matches or do stuff like that. I'm like, I can't. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. Or at night when I do have a couple minutes, and they're like, well, hey, you have to have time for yourself, and they're right. They're absolutely right. So what I try and do is it's very very important to me that I have a very high level of skill. It is part of my genetic makeup and who I am.
Mm.
So the difference between me and most is I've made the conscious decision that no matter what happens, no matter what physical ailment I'm fighting, no matter how I feel, no matter how tired I am, within reason, I will not take no for an answer when it comes time to putting my few minutes a day into training for myself. So with that being said, sometimes I get home at 10:30 at night and I'll take a shower and I'll be like, man, it sure would be nice just to put on my jammies and go to bed. But I'm like, you know what? I need 10 minutes. I need 10 minutes to go do this. And
Yeah.
I know it sounds like it's superficial, but it's not because I choose to do that. And whenever I try and make a left turn from that, I take a minute and say, okay, is this the decision that I really want to make? Because this decision may be the same decision tomorrow. It may be the same decision next week. And then where will I be? And when I frame it like that, it's really easy for me to kind of grit my teeth and go do my job, you know?
Yeah. Yep.
Really, because what happens a lot of times is people it is their want to better themselves in some way, shape, or fashion, but they let everything else that they can't control dictate the investment they put into bettering themselves. So work, something going on with anything, the dog's sick, I've got to do laundry, and it's very easy to put those things in front of yourself instead of saying, you know what, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, because we've all got 10 or 15 minutes to chew the fat with friends or watch TV or do things like that. But rarely do we say, okay, I've got 10 minutes to go do my dry fire. Now, I will say, not everyone has that level of drive to get good with a gun, and that's okay. But if it is what you want, there are a couple things that have to happen. You have to have quality practice, you have to have recency of practice, and you have to have a dedication to get better at it so you can be present and articulate what it is you're experiencing to change it for the better. If any of those things falter, it will be a roadblock for you. And
Right. Yeah.
you'll just continue being on that treadmill of, maybe small incremental gains. But if you want exponential growth over a short period of time, that is the commitment level it kind of takes.
Yep.
So for the normal person out there, I wouldn't expect them or push them very hard. For you, someone that's looking for a significantly higher level of skill, you have to make decisions. And it purely is, we can say it's an exterior force, but it's a decision you're making at some
Yeah.
point. Uh, I will let this go for that, or I will let this, and I'm not saying let any other obligations falter. That's certainly not what I'm saying. But
Yeah, but I mean, you have to move stuff around so that you have time to
sure,
prioritize your life-saving skill. Like, yeah, I totally get that. And I just think it's something that, doesn't get talked about too much because
yeah,
nobody
it's
ever really wants
hard.
to be too vulnerable and say,
Yeah,
hey, I feel like I can't really prioritize my dry fire practice right now because I have too many other things.
sure,
Because
and
then once we say that and once we talk to each other about it, then situations can get solved. Like, well, hey, what if I'm recording videos with Chris and I'm actually dry firing in my basement for an
yeah.
hour? you
Another
know?
another secret I'll tell you, and this is going to sound really strange, but it's something to kind of think through. And I can't remember if we've talked about this, but even if you didn't gun up, if you got to a point where you could take 10 or 15 minutes where you're in a quiet space, you can clear your mind and you can visualize doing a task, your brain does not know the difference
Yeah. Yeah.
between physically doing it and a strong visualization. So, I mean, I'll have times throughout the day where, I mean, I'm somewhat driven, but
You're a nerd.
I'll have times during the day driving home from work where I'll literally be visualizing specific pieces of something,
Hmm.
very, very clearly. So there's ways around it, but the biggest thing I can say is for anyone that's trying to get on this path, it takes a significant investment, mentally, physically, time-wise, monetarily, however you want to frame it to achieve a high level of skill. But you have to want to invest in it. It's not a passive investment, it's active. And you have to get to the point where if it's something you really want, and this, gosh, I feel like a life coach now, but this goes beyond like shooting.
Hmm.
It could be your career, it could be who you are as a person, it could be things you want to work on. But the moment you set a goal and you adhere to it and you commit to it, you know, input a little bit of discipline and
Yeah.
stop giving yourself excuses to fail because that's literally what you're doing.
Yeah, I know. I know, and I'm aware of it, so I need to need to change that crap.
Yeah.
And that's one of the hardest parts is, being vulnerable and willing to kind of change up how you're doing stuff to make room for this skill that you need to myelinate.
Yeah. And like the stuff like say you have a night that you can't put it together on like your scheduled night. Okay, but be very, very, very aggressive about making that time up somehow.
Yeah, yeah. And it's been easier to make up the time rather than I think I might need to rework my schedule a little bit because,
Sure.
I think I said I was doing it on Tuesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays,
Mhm.
but I have figured out it's so much easier for me to do it on Sundays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. So I didn't get
Hey,
any of the
that
days
that's
right.
the big thing is we go through with your goals, like we talked about that with like the goals, the program in which you kind of set up. As you get into it, things do or do not work, and don't be afraid to change that. But
Yeah.
what you
Yeah.
don't do is scrap it. You augment it or, move it around, but you don't scrap the plan. And that's more often than not, people scrap the plan.
Yep. Yep. So I'm trying to just change it little by little when I'm figuring out what works. But yeah, 30 minutes when I get home from work on Wednesdays. It seems like I have time there, so I'm going to try to myelinate that skill. And yeah, like I said, I think that it's a good thing for everybody to think about. So I'm glad that we got a couple minutes to talk about it.
Yeah, I'll give you one last thing before we close out on this,
Yeah, absolutely.
is when it becomes a habit. It's like anything. Like so, New Year's resolutions. Why don't New
Hmm.
Year's resolutions work? Because people go to the gym twice, and then they figure out a way not to go. But if you make it a habit, and it takes a little bit of time to reinforce a habit, but once it is a habit, it kind of just happens and it becomes part of your daily routine or your weekly routine, however you want to frame it. Um, and that it gets significantly easier, but you have to get over that. And it's a new thing hump.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Getting around that learning curve takes a second.
Yeah, it
I
does.
think I'm getting there though.
And you
Yeah.
will. And eventually what'll happen is it'll just become part of your everyday thing. That's the people that religiously probably isn't the right term, but routinely dry fire or the
Mhm,
people that have significantly high skill, that's normally what's happened is it just becomes part of what they do.
mhm. All right. Well, I think that's about all we have to say for today. So we will go ahead and catch you guys next week on the Chronicles of the Range Monkey when we're talking about evaluating this routine and see where we're at. So, as always, thanks for talking, Chris.
See you next time.